Morning, everyone. I'm an adjunct associate professor at the University of Lethbridge, and I teach business law on Saturday morning. And I can see that the morning is not a popular time for going to school. My students at least have to go to class, but they probably don't have to go this morning. So I teach at the University of Lethbridge. The main thing that I do, though, is I am a specialist in the area of image-based evidence. And so that is most of the work that I do. I teach extensively in Europe, the United Kingdom, North America, and Singapore. I'm in Europe now, and do a lot of work with AI-generated images from a legal perspective. I'm not a technical expert. One of the international projects I'm working on here is on the impact of the recently passed European Union Artificial Intelligence Act and how that impacts on the use of facial recognition technology. So just a little bit of a preamble to why I'm talking about confronting AI-generated and other false images. So my specialty is the use of image-based evidence in international and domestic criminal prosecutions. And we've, of course, all see images every day. Every image that we see is created by a person or created by a device, CCTV system, for example. Some of those creations are objective. If a CCTV camera is running and a person goes by or vehicle goes by, then the camera will capture whatever is in the frame. But a lot of images are created by a person, and so those are very subjective depictions where the photographer decides what to include in the image and also what to exclude from the image. And so the motivation of the image creator is an important factor in looking at what image is actually presented for consideration. Where do we get images from? Of course, first person. When you shoot a video with your smartphone, that's first person imagery. We have a lot of anonymous imagery. We see a lot of that on social media and other open source sites where we don't know who the photographer is. We don't have access to the original media. And we see a lot of those in popular media as well. Images serve many purposes, entertainment purposes. So we have a lot of AI-generated imagery that is there for the purpose of entertaining us. If you look at Game of Thrones, for example, lots of AI-generated imagery there. But that's for entertainment purposes. We want that. We also use images to create a visual record. It might be a photo that you take at a birthday party just to record that event. Or it may be something more significant to gather an evidential record of something that has occurred. Of course, it's used for disinformation and misinformation campaigns. We see that with the Russian conflict with Ukraine and the Israel-Gaza conflict, where there are images that are being used for disinformation purposes to try and create a different narrative for those conflicts. Images are used to create discord and mischief, and they're used to prove things and to disprove things as well. We've all, at the very least, seen deepfakes. Deepfakes are a form of malicious transformation where a real video recording can be modified to show us something different, or it can be used to fabricate an entirely fake video. Deepfakes create synthetic media, and they're accomplished by face replacements. So there's lots of examples in the popular media of images that look an awful lot like Tom Cruise, but it's not Tom Cruise. It's a deep fake. And deep fakes are quite common in online pornography, where stars who never participated in any pornographic productions are now starring in them because of deep fakes, because of changing faces. Face morphing, where a real face is morphed to create a different face. Face reenactment or puppetry. This is where a real face is modified to say or do things that it didn't actually do. And so that would be a real face saying things that that person didn't actually say, for example. Face generation, so that's creating a wholly synthetic face. This person doesn't exist on Earth, and AI has created that face and put that person in the video. Face editing or retouching, so using a real face, but editing or retouching it so that it looks either somewhat different or quite different. Speech synthesis, creating artificial speech with the idea being that it will seem like this particular person is talking. One of the things that AI-generated imagery and other false imagery is used for is for misattribution. And so that is using real content that purports to depict something that it's not. So a lot of the environment in which I do my work here has to do with international criminal matters. And so the top ones, of course, are Israel, Gaza, and Russia, Ukraine. And we see a lot of misattribution videos there. For example, there have been videos showing a Syrian rocket attack rather, and then the people that are interested in creating that narrative claim that that occurred in Gaza. We've seen that in the Russia-Ukraine conflict, where when that started, there were all sorts of images of fighter jets and rockets and whatnot, but a lot of that came from the 2014 invasion of Crimea, or entirely different conflicts altogether. So again, that is using those images to further a narrative. Shallow fakes are when real images and audio are altered. So earlier this spring, for reasons that mystify me, as if people didn't have better things to do, there was an image that was circulated quite broadly of the royal family in the United Kingdom, and it was a picture taken by Princess Kate. And people were quick to point out that there were problems with the image, that it had been modified through Photoshop, and there were some telltale signs of modifications. Who really cares? But people were only happy to point that out. That's an example of a shallow fake, and where Princess Kate had used Photoshop to do some amateur corrections through media. And then audio. Some of you won't remember this, or perhaps even know who I'm talking about, but the former Speaker of the House in Congress, rather, was Nancy Pelosi in the United States. And the Republicans didn't and don't think much of her. And they had put out a video of her speaking, and it made it seem like she was drunk. All they did was they slowed the audio down so that it sounded like a drunk person. But a lot of people took that to be true. Those are really easy to detect, but those are examples of shallow fakes. So with that preamble, do false images matter? Well, really, it depends on the purpose for which we're using the images. And I like to ask these two questions. What questions are we asking of the images, and what work are they expected to do? So if we're using images for the purpose of proving something or disproving something or making an important political or other statement, then false images matter. If it's for entertainment purposes or innocuous purposes, it probably doesn't matter. I'm in the truth business, and so I'm very much interested in the use of image-based evidence in the search for the truth, because the problem is, if we can't trust what we see, can the truth be knowable? If I can't trust that this image that is being presented by an investigator or a party in litigation is true, then how can we find the truth? And so we ask a number of questions. Which images are real? Are we able to determine whether a particular image is real? Do we have the expertise required to do that? And are we on guard that perhaps this image isn't real? Is the image wholly synthetic? Some images are very, very good, but they're wholly synthetic. Which images are real but have been improperly modified by humans? Those are deep fakes and shallow fakes. So here's an image. If we ask this question of the media, is this image helpful in answering the question of whether tankers can levitate above the surface of the sea? Well, this image would not be good for this purpose. This is a real image. This hasn't been modified by AI or any other purpose. This is called a superior mirage, which just shows what it shows. So it's a real image. But if the question is, can tankers levitate above the sea? This is not a good image for that purpose because it's not a reliable image. So I come from Calgary, and this is Paul Dunphy doing the Global News weather. This is an authentic image. I just shot this with my smartphone when I was watching the news one night. But look at the low temperature, minus 312. So that obviously is a real image. It's an authentic image. No one's modified it, but it's not a reliable image if we're using that to determine what the low temperature is going to be in Calgary. Because, I mean, minus 312, that's a little bit colder than we're used to in southern Alberta. This is a good image from, I just happened to notice it here in Europe and in advance of King's Day. So great image of the birds, but not a reliable image if the question is, do birds wear crowns? But they do in this image, but it's not correct. So here's an image at a marina in Italy, and unless you had a reason to question that image, there'd be no reason to doubt that image. If I told you, here's a picture of my friend at a marina in Italy, you'd say, oh, that's really nice. Or is it this one? So let me go back. These are identical images, except we've just changed the face. And it's only through the use of forensic software that you can determine what part of the image has been changed to reveal a different face. AI-generated images may look realistic, but they're not real. That's the whole point. They're not real images. They've been hallucinated by a computer based on an input request from typically from a human being, but it could come from AI as well. AI can generate AI. Does it matter that they're AI generated? Well, if truth is essential, then it matters. I consulted on a mass shooting prosecution in Washington State earlier this year. You may have seen, well, you may or may not have seen this in the news. It was the first prosecution that I'm aware of in America where AI-enhanced video was tendered in a trial. During this mass shooting, where a number of people were killed, one of the bystanders had recorded parts of the event with his or her smartphone. And the prosecution used that video to show what that scene was like and to get as much out of that video as you can. And with the actual video, you could see there was something on the floor, but you couldn't tell what it was. You certainly couldn't tell that it was a gun. And whether it was a gun or not was important to the defense in this case, based on the facts. And so the defense had hired a film producer to create an AI-enhanced video. So an entirely artificially enhanced version of the original video. And the issue before the court, and this is the issue that I consulted on, was whether that AI-enhanced video should be admitted, because the AI-enhanced video was false. In the AI-enhanced video, it clearly showed a gun on the ground, which is what the defense wanted there to be. And so the AI enhancement was encouraged to make that object look like a gun on the ground, because that would further the defense narrative. So there was quite a lot of argument by the lawyers on both sides and the experts on both sides. And ultimately, the judge ruled that that AI-enhanced video was inadmissible because it wasn't real. And so I had done an interview for NBC News and for a radio station in Chicago on this particular issue because of the novelty of seeing AI video in a criminal prosecution. If I told you that this was a picture of my wife and I hiking in the mountains in Alberta, there would be no reason for you to doubt this. I mean, why would you, unless you thought I was a liar? But this is a video completely created by artificial intelligence. And we know that because if you do a shadow analysis, you'll see that one of the shadows doesn't line up. And when you're applying forensic techniques to an AI-generated image, if you can show that one shadow doesn't line up, then you know that the image is false. And so here you can see in the red triangle, one of these shadows from the leg doesn't line up. That's all you need to know that this is an AI-generated video or image, but it's a really good image. I mean, let's go back here. That is a great image. And I'd love to hike there, but it's just not real. So here's another example. This took about, I didn't create this, but I saw an expert creating this. It took about 4 minutes to create. And the idea was, let's show a refugee camp, which is pretty important nowadays with what's going on in the world. And let's put some soldiers in there, and let's put a tank in there. And the soldiers originally were white, so let's make these soldiers black, and let's position the tank so the turret is pointing at the tents. And in about 4 minutes, you've got this image. This is a very realistic looking image. So if you've got a party who wants to say, look at these soldiers, look at this military hardware in a refugee camp, well, this picture will certainly further that objective. And that's part of disinformation, is using images for the purpose of a disinformation campaign. So we go through a tripart analysis: authentication, reliability, and interpretation. Authentication is the process of determining whether an image is that which it is purported to be. Is this an image of a particular person standing at the marina? Well, no, at least one of them is wrong. Is this an image that shows soldiers in a tank in a refugee camp? Yes, it shows that, but it's not authentic. It is not what it purports to be. And so we use a spectrum approach in authentication where we look at things like, do we have access to the original media? Do we have access to the photographer? Is there evidence that can be used to corroborate whether this scene is legitimate, whether what is being shown is legitimate, or is it wholly synthetic? There are active and passive forgery detection techniques. Active forgery detection techniques is where, if you have the original image, you can determine what changes have been made to it. Passive forgery detection techniques rely on content-based analysis. And so the previous couple of examples with the hiking and the refugee camp, you would use content-based analysis to look for anomalies, to look for evidence of lighting problems, shadow problems, copy-paste problems, that sort of thing. And of course, this is done by experts, certainly not done by me. I'm a lawyer. I just write about this stuff and research about this stuff, but other people much smarter than me actually do this work. And volume isn't proof of authenticity. I was presenting at a conference in London, England, in November to judges and lawyers and a bunch of other folks. And a judge asked me, surely if I see the same image coming from a number of different locations, that must mean that it's authentic. And I said, with respect, Your Honor, that isn't what it means. The fact that you find an image in many different sources has nothing to do with whether it's legitimate or not. So a plethora of inauthentic images doesn't make them authentic. AI is used for triage purposes. So the International Criminal Court, I'm here in The Hague in the Netherlands, where the International Criminal Court is located. The Office of the Prosecutor has a portal called OTP Link, Office of the Prosecutor Link. It is a worldwide portal where anyone in the world can submit images to the portal on current conflicts. So obviously most of them are coming from Israel and Gaza and Ukraine. And at present, it gets about 25,000 submissions a month. And AI is used to triage those images, to look for duplicates, to look for images that perhaps don't show any of those conflicts. And that is just a screening tool. AI doesn't make decisions as to what is evidence. Humans do that, but AI is being used for triage purposes there. Then we look, is an image reliable? And reliability is in part dependent upon what questions we're asking of the images. So it may have macro level reliability. It's reliable for the big picture, but it may not have micro level reliability. Is it reliable for a very small detail in an image? So it might be reliable to show that there's a building there, but not reliable for the purpose of identifying a vehicle or a person, because it's not good enough. I do a lot of work here in Europe on dealing with satellite imagery. And that's the thing there. Satellite imagery is very good for macro level topics, but not so good for micro level topics, depending on the satellite. And so hallmarks of reliability. Can we identify and examine the source of the media? Where did it come from? Who has access to it? Who's the photographer? Can we interview the photographer? Can we do a metadata and content analysis of the images? And then we look at interpretation, where we use a spectrum approach as well. The more complex an image, the more the need is for expert interpretation. Some images are easier. I generally am of the view that images do not speak for themselves, that they need narration, they need interpretation by a qualified person. And in some cases, that will be an expert. Pardon me, I think that deepfakes and other AI-generated imagery will continue to improve and make it harder to distinguish fair from foul. What there is right now is a cat and mouse game where forensic techniques are invented to catch forgeries, and then the people who create the forgeries create a way around the forensic techniques with anti-forensic techniques, and then we have to have a forensic technique to catch the next generation of imagery. And so it very, very much is a cat and mouse game, and it leads to an erosion of trust, where we can't always trust the images that we see. And it also gives rise to something called the liar's dividend, where even real images are discounted as fake. And so we can conveniently dismiss inconvenient facts. And we see that fairly often, where if someone doesn't like an image, if it places them in a bad light, the immediate response is to say it's fake news. Belief in images should not be our default. Now, clearly, if there are images in your personal life and no one's trying to trick you, it's totally fine. So I'm not suggesting paranoia with images. But for images that really matter, images that we're using as evidence or for really important propositions, then I think belief shouldn't be our default, and trust in those images is something that should be earned. And that requires people with the appropriate qualifications to proactively assess authenticity, reliability, and interpretation, and to look for corroborative evidence. There is a new book on this and many other things dealing with image-based evidence. It's my book. It just came out here in Europe in February and in North America in May of this year. And I'm advised that the University of Lethbridge has actually purchased the book, and it will be available later this month. One of the chapters in the book is interestingly on the use of virtual reality in the international courtroom, where I've made out a case for the use of an immersive virtual environment in the appropriate case, where we could take judges to killing fields virtually, rather than actually taking them to conflict countries. So very interesting proposition. That's kind of futuristic, to be sure, but interesting stuff. So I have gone exactly 21 minutes. So I will stop talking, and I'd be happy to answer any questions if anyone has any.
Awesome. Dr. Jonathan, thank you so much. I have a question. How did different jurisdictions around the world approach the issue of genetic disinformation? You show one, like different color scale, something like this. But what can we learn? Maybe there are different strategies, and some government of USA do something different from Europe or something like this.
Yeah, there isn't much of a unified approach. Different countries are approaching this differently. The most common thing is that most countries aren't approaching it aggressively enough. Some countries are certainly farther ahead. I was speaking at a conference here in The Hague Monday and Tuesday this past week, and one of the members of the workshop is a Ukrainian prosecutor from Kharkiv. And she was saying how ill-equipped they are to deal with the imagery that they have. They just don't have the resources to handle the images that they're getting, and they're getting an unbelievable volume of images from people on their smartphones. So it really depends. And then we have other countries in Africa, some in the Middle East, where there's less access to cameras, less access to images. So it really is. It is a project in progress, and in many respects, we're still at the forefront of dealing with this, and it does really vary from country to country.
Thank you.